Hello everyone, welcome back to Gamescom. I'm joined by Bob from Monolith. Nice to meet you, Bob. How are you?
Good, I'm doing good.
And we've just seen a presentation of Shadow of Mordor. Now, one of the things that really struck me about it when I first heard about the game, I heard it was an action game set in Middle-earth. I wasn't sure, how close to the original Tolkien lore it was going to stick, but we got our first glimpse of Celebrimbor in there. So we've got, some of the lore from the Silmarillion is making its way into the game. How much of the lore are you using as a foundation for the story?
It's absolutely a huge factor for us to keep it as authentic as possible, as true to both the details and also the broad themes that Tolkien established. And working within that, digging as deep as we can. Mordor is a place that everybody knows about it, but it hasn't been explored in great depth and detail in the books or the films. So getting to kind of flesh that out and the thousands of years of history that are layered there from battles upon battles. So we've not just in the storylines and stuff, but scattered all around the world, all kinds of things you can find to explore the deeper stories from those layers of history.
And it's really exciting as well, especially for me as a massive Tolkien fan, to see Sauron back in the early days when he was quite pretty and elf-like as well. So fans, hardcore Tolkien fans, and also fans in the movies who don't really know much of the lore, they're going to learn a lot more about the backstory of Tolkien through this game.
Yeah, that's right. We did dig deep in there and try to present it in a way that's going to kind of heighten the stakes for everybody. I mean, getting back to that, Celebrimbor in the Second Age, he's one of the most powerful characters in the history of Middle-earth, and someone who truly has the potential to go toe-to-toe with Sauron. One of the few characters you could think of that could really stand in that role. So it's fun, like you said, Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, his fair form when he's actually working with Celebrimbor to make the Rings of Power. It's a really important moment in Middle-earth history for us to bring to people who, maybe all they know is that there are rings. Yeah. So fleshing that out for people is going to be fun. And
it's cool to see him before he just became a big flaming eye on a tower as well. But for people who just know the films, could you give us a little brief overview of where your story sits? Because we've got the Hobbit trilogy coming out, we had the Lord of the Rings trilogy before. Where does Shadow of Mordor sit in the canon?
So it's in this 60, 70-year period between the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So after the Battle of Five Armies, Bilbo has stolen the ring from Gollum, and he's going searching for it, and he ends up in Mordor, so you've got Gollum in the area at this time. And then you've got this period where there's not much written about it. We're kind of telling the new story of what bridges that gap that sets us up for the events of The Lord of the Rings, and why things went the way they went at that point.
And it's set in an open world in Mordor. Now, what really struck me was it looked very pretty. And in all we've seen of Mordor so far, it looks quite bleak and overcast, and there's rocks everywhere. So how exciting for you was it to be able to get some real kind of creative license and really go to town on bringing Mordor to life like we've never seen it before?
Yeah, that's been really fun because, like I said, everybody knows Mordor in concept, but we don't explore it in great detail, and especially at this moment in history where we're taking place, as Sauron is just now returning to Mordor after thousands of years of being gone. So it's really had quite a bit of time to regrow and kind of come back to life and become more of like a frontier territory rather than the desolate hellscape that you see in the movies. So now Sauron's just revving up that war machine and getting the industrialization going and tearing out all of the life that's grown in there, and we're seeing it in that moment of transition. So yeah, that was fun for us to mine our neighborhood, Eastern Washington, where we're from, for a lot of source, as well as, of course, New Zealand, and the reference we get from the films and everything, to kind of make a place that fits in Middle-earth and fits in this moment of transition.
And touching upon the combat as well, because it's one of the most impressive things I've seen about the game so far. We saw it in the presentation there. It's so fluid and smooth, and it looks like you've got your combos and counters. How important was it for you to really nail that combat? And it's quite violent as well, and probably more violent than the films were.
Yeah, that's true. The basis for it, we started right from the get-go. That's one of the things we had up and running first in development, and iterated on the most and put through the most cycles of play test and feedback and polish. And we started with that kind of foundation of our WB brethren and Rocksteady, the Arkham combat, core melee, and really just got to bring that, like you said, that level of lethality where you get to actually kill the orcs, chop the heads and stab, and it's very visceral and brutal, but also very fluid. And you've got this character too, who's a ranger, who's got the kind of skills of Aragorn or Boromir, but he's also got the wraith inside him, who's an elf, who's much more nimble and quick. And so we get to blend these two styles of back and forth between the wraith world and the physical world, and the ranger and the elf, and that's a lot of fun. And then, of course, mixing into that moment-to-moment melee combat, you can really fluidly go in and out of range using your bow or stealth, and that's been a lot of fun too, to build missions and environments that really support fluidly going between any play style at any moment.
And what we also saw quite a lot of was the Nemesis system, which is, well, I'll let you explain it, but we've got orcs that can kill you, and then they get more powerful, and you can come back on revenge missions and try and take them out. So what is the Nemesis system for people who've not heard of it before, and how does it fit into the story of the game?
Well, so the Nemesis system is kind of the core innovation we're trying to bring to this third-person open world sandbox action genre. Basic premise is, in every other game, you've got a horde of grunts, cannon fodder, the guys who are just the faceless enemies you're mowing down. In our game, we wanted to make sure that every single one of those guys has the potential to really grow and become somebody that matters. So you might mow down 100 of them, but that one guy that killed you, instead of rewinding from a checkpoint and just replaying the last minute of your life over again, because of the fact of Talion's undeath, he can come back, he's resurrected, we can let time just move forward, and that grunt, that nobody, can actually become somebody. He can become a captain, a boss, essentially, in Sauron's army. You can learn his name, his personality, start to build a relationship with him, because when you come back, he's going to remember you, and he's going to speak to that, and the way you fought him will matter too. It could actually influence his strengths and weaknesses, because that's another element gameplay-wise. Narratively, you got the kind of relationship building that goes on with these guys having a persistent memory. But then on the gameplay side, they develop strengths and weaknesses, and they grow as they grow and level up and gain more power that you can, if you're careful, really exploit. If you get a guy who's particularly weak and you used fire, you caught him on fire in that mission, but he survived, he might develop a fear of fire in the future you could exploit. But if he was particularly tough, it might instead be a hate of fire that'll just enrage him and make him that much harder.
What I thought looked really exciting about it was how when you'd have like an orc and Talion, their swords would clash, and there'd be a little bit of dialogue, almost like trash talking going on between them, and that kind of sense that you could build your own rival, like your own rival could grow, and you can build your own story within Middle-earth, and the satisfaction of finally killing them and seeing their head roll in slow motion with a horrible snarl on their face as well. I mean, that's just really exciting.
Yeah, it's been really fun to develop, because you've got the traditional kind of linear story mission kind of thing where you craft the characters, but as designers we got to learn a different art form to give it a system that lets stories emerge, that lets the player craft the stories, and having those kind of moments, building in all those opportunities for the orc to speak to you, to get in your face, to trash talk a little bit, like you said, and actually we're kind of inspired a lot by the pen and paper RPGs. It's an interesting place to go, but the way you can dynamically, it's basically an AI dungeon master, right? Creating stories for people out of the events that they happen to stumble into, and then we get to pay it off with these really high fidelity visuals to really drive it home and make it visceral and satisfying.
And it's not just melee combat either, is it? We saw quite a few of Talion's abilities where Celebrimbor would take over with the arrows, and there was other kind of magical stuff that's in there. So could you just give us a brief overview of some of the abilities outside just, slicing orcs' head off that you've got in the game?
Yeah, the basic idea of the skill tree is it's split into the kind of ranger skills and the wraith skills, and you really do fluidly move back and forth between Talion and Celebrimbor. And Celebrimbor especially has some of the more impressive visually and more kind of supernatural powers, because he's taking advantage of the Wraith world and the power that gives him. So, for example, in the demo we're showing here, we have a move that unlocks called the Shadow Strike, where you kind of move through the Wraith world instantaneously and use enemies as almost like grapple points. Like you can just zip right to them and chop their head off and be on your way. So it's a cool way to enter a fight in an intimidating way, but it can also be used as a good traversal mechanism for escape. If you get overwhelmed and there's an archer up there, you can just kind of target him and pop out and kind of get out of dodge that way. So it's pretty flexible. The other big thing though is you sort of grow to over the course of the game is being able to dominate your enemies. So growing the power to the point that it's kind of the nature of power in Middle-earth is bending your enemies to your will, getting to the point where the Sauron's captains and war chiefs can actually fight for you. You can send them on missions and have them kill each other off and either help them or just watch the chaos play out. And so it becomes another just tool and toy in the sandbox to create chaos.
Sure. And just to wrap up, I know a lot of people will be really excited by the concept of an open world Mordor. How much scope is there for exploring off the beaten track, or is it going to be quite tightly narrative and combat focused?
There's a lot of room, a lot of freedom here. The core kind of structure of the game is very much like Red Dead Redemption in terms of the main story even has branches, and you can do multiple different main story missions in parallel. We actually had the lead writer of Red Dead Redemption write our story and work with us on it, so we got some good tips from him on that kind of structure. But outside of that main story, there's tons of side missions, there's collectibles, stories to uncover and explore throughout the world, and the Nemesis system is really a constant procedurally generating mission and boss machine. It's kind of giving you endless boss fights and new missions to go on that are kind of custom tailored to how you're playing. So yeah, there's a lot of freedom in how you approach and what paths you take through the game.
Wow, awesome stuff. Well, thank you so much for talking to us, Bob. That is Shadow of Mordor. It's looking absolutely awesome. Don't forget to keep watching this channel. We've got absolutely loads more videos coming up from Gamescom all through the week.